Howdy, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Mindful Constitution podcast. I have a little backstory to my guest today, which is that I was gifted her cookbook for kids, farm to table, like kid and family recipes. And it's called Let Them Eat Dirt. And I was really intrigued by the cookbook and the author. So I looked into her some more and asked her to be on the podcast. And she said yes. So super excited to have Andrea Bemis here today, who's a mother of two babies, two kiddos. She has 3 cookbooks. And she is an organic farmer in Oregon, but started in Mass, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And outside of that, she said now her passion is very focused in kind of the health of our children and the next generation. And so without further ado, hello, Andrea. How are you?
I'm great, Katie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to dig in. I feel like we have so many areas of overlap with like nutrition and holistic wellness and motherhood and even like just kind of slightly unconventional living. And so I'm excited to talk about all of those areas of overlap and share our conversation. And I mentioned that you kind of started your organic farming journey in Massachusetts, as far as I know. And I wanted to hear more about how you got into organic farming and how that inspired the creation of Tumbleweed Farm, right?
Yeah, Tumbleweed's where we're at, our farm now. Yeah, I guess the short version of that is, this is going to really age me, but my husband and I met 20 years ago working on a ranch in Montana. And it was a summer job, and he's from Massachusetts, and he grew up on like a massive organic vegetable farm in Concord, Massachusetts, Hutchins Farm. And the summer that I met him, I was pretty intrigued I'm from like the suburbs outside of Portland, Oregon, and farming was, just like not something that was in my wheelhouse. But I was really intrigued by that lifestyle, and he wanted nothing to do with it when we first met, just kind of that, cliche of just wanting to get away from where he grew up. And he was going to college up in Maine. And so we met in Montana. We were both 20 and 21 and kind of doing our own things for a few years, but kept in touch after meeting. And actually we kind of bounced around the West for a while, but both of us started to have like a strong draw. We were in Bend, Oregon living for a couple of years and had a strong draw to like do something a little more meaningful. We were working kind of paycheck to paycheck and living just to have fun.
What were you doing before? Sorry for interrupting. I'm just curious,
Yeah.
like, what were you doing before when you're like, get me the heck away from this?
Well, so when we were in Bend, I was working at a running store. My husband was working at the mountain there. And we were kind of into the outdoor lifestyle out there, which is fun when you're young, but for us, it was starting to feel a little old. And I was kind of getting into cooking a little bit, but not really. I mean, I like could make mac and cheese, wasn't really like that focused on health. Child of the 80s and 90s, just like diet culture. Like I did not know what health looked like. Really didn't know where food came from. And as like a 20-something-year-old, that's like so, it's kind of embarrassing to be so ignorant, but I'm realizing now that like I was in like a very large boat. None of my friends really knew how food was grown, what health looked like. And yeah, my husband and I we were on a hike and we wanted to do something more meaningful. And we kind of started talking a little bit about the farm, and it's like, if we want jobs, I know my family will hire us. And we kind of just decided to pack. I mean, we had nothing. We were in our 20s. We packed up a little truck and moved with, a suitcase. And moved out there. And got the lay of the land, and it was like baptism by fire. It was awful. I hated it the first couple of years. Um, I was in over my head into like what farming really looks like and what it actually is on a working farm. It's
Mhm.
not gardening. It's not this like slow, idyllic, like slow paced life.
Yeah.
But I slowly fell in love with it. Like the hard work, it was the first time in my life that I was like really proud of like I didn't have any skills. Like I have never felt like more accomplished than just like toughening up. I really was at a point in my life where I needed a little um toughening up and working on the
Yeah,
farm to do that. So that's
for
kind of the
sure.
long short. We were
Yeah.
3 years, but the operation we were on was really big. It was a big family operation. And I'm from Oregon, and my husband loves to ski, and we were kind of yearning to be back out west, but wanted to really scale down and see if we could kind of farm on our own, on a really small operation. Because we also kind of learned a lot about just the big scale was great, but financially, you can actually make quite a bit of money on a small scale. I think people think that you need to have a massive amount of land to make it all work. But for what we're doing, growing mainly vegetables, you can be on a small acreage, a small plot of land. And so we moved out here um, and leased land for a year, worked, odd jobs when we weren't farming, and then eventually landed on the property we're on now and have grown our business and our farm, and now we've got 2 kiddos. So
Yeah. Oh, that's so inspirational. And I love what you said about it's farming isn't as, it's very romanticized and sometimes and that, but then actually working on a working farm back when I was like 20, I did the worldwide opportunities on organic farms woofing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like milking goats and doing the vegetable garden, and they were like having us weed whacking, and the farmer was literally just like laughing at us half the time. Like we were like, "What do I do with this weed whacker?"
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. It's
Like
really humbling.
we thought we were just gonna like be selling honey or something.
Uh-huh. Plucking a carrot out of the ground. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
taking pictures with like ripe vegetables, but I was like, no, it was a lot of like cleaning chicken shit and yeah, just all types of stuff. They had a lot of going on that farm, so really interesting. And also what you said caught my ear about, I think for starters what you said about a lot of people being in that boat, not necessarily really knowing what like real health looks like. And that's actually really inspiring to think that like you went from a state where you really didn't, know much about cooking or gardening or farming at all, and you weren't really connected to your food, and you went from that all the way to, having your own organic farm is makes gives people a lot of hope depending on where they're starting and where they're trying to go. And you also said, like, I really had no idea, like, what real health was. And I'm wondering just, like, how has that shifted for you? And, like, what does real health mean to you now?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, and it's been ever evolving, even to this day, and even like feeding my children, like that has like evolved from feeding my first kid to feeding my second. But for me personally, like I remember in my early 20s, and I think that this is common with a lot of, you know, women, but, like wanting to like be thin and not, it was like more like I grew up in like the Diet Coke and like, you know,
Yeah.
factory Lay's chips or pretzels. Like, I did not know what a real meal looked like and what like where like what like real food really was. And when we started working on the farm, I would go like weeks without ever even like looking in a mirror, and like God forbid I was like filthy, but like it was like, oh, my body is working so hard, I need to nourish it. And like, oh dang, we're like growing rutabagas and beets and turnips, all these foods that I didn't grow up with, and we're killing ourselves out there growing them. So I was just like, I need to learn to cook. I need to learn how to eat this stuff, prepare it, and damn it, we're going to learn to like it. Like, we
Yeah.
are going to learn to like turnips. I don't care if like this is going to take a lot of butter and cheese, but we're going to like love turnips. And so once I started to like really work with my body and be outside and be in nature and stopped giving a shit about really like what I looked like, and also like getting outside myself, like we were doing something that was really like supporting the local community. Like people would come and buy from us and they'd be feeding their families. And for the first time ever, I was like, it's not about me. And up until, my early 20s, I kind of, I don't know, I was very selfish, I guess. Um, and I think that health for me was just like learning what my body was capable of, learning that I've got one body. So trying to treat it well. And I mean, that was ever evolving through like my 20s and 30s, even while farming. Um, but like it was the first like freedom I think I had from a culture that I grew up in, which was like, yeah, the 90s to early 2000s of like,
Flamin' hot Cheetos and like all the
yeah,
processed foods.
like totally ultra processed food that just makes you feel like shit. And now I know what it feels like to feel like crap, and I don't want to feel like crap, and I really don't want my kids to feel like crap. And I want my body to operate the way it's supposed to. And I think that that can be really simplified. And I think people, even friends now, food and like what are we supposed to eat? What's good for you? Like it's gotten so complicated. But I think if you spend a little bit of time at a farmer's market or on somebody's farm, it really simplifies what is probably gonna work for your body.
Yeah, and just being connected. It's like the whole cycle of like being connected to your food, growing your food, the relationship you have with that, and harmony you have with what you're bringing to your table, and also just like that physical labor and being outside and being with the earth. It's just like so many benefits of it.
Totally, totally. And I think that like I will kind of want that for so many people. Just like once you're out there and like birds and work, like it is so nice to just, I mean, I grew up an indoor girl, like this was so eye-opening to really be with nature and to like connect and to like wear 30 different layers of clothes a day. It's like in
Mhm.
one day, it feels like seven, just all the seasons just happened in one day because you start out
So
totally
early.
nude, and then you're shedding clothes. And then before you know it, you're in somebody else's clothes because they left, a sweatshirt at the, end of a carrot bed. And all of a sudden you're cold. So you've put on some, like, it's great. And for me, it's been a wonderful life shift.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I love that. It's so cool to hear, making those full 180s and like that process because I think a lot of people do see people living more, outside the mainstream or kind of unconventionally or like saying like, "Hey, I'm going to start my own farm." And I know I've definitely been guilty of thinking like, "Oh, I couldn't do that though." And so it's really nice to hear people's stories where it's like I came from the exact same position a lot of people come from, which is very disconnected to where their food is sourced and also like really the quality of the nutrition we're eating, how it's impacting us. Not to say that like you're never going to eat something processed or whatnot, but
Right.
which kind of brings me to my next question, which is like, what makes high quality nutrition important to you now that you've kind of like really connected to your food source? And I guess the follow up to that is like, as a mom, I think a lot of people struggle with that balance of like, all right, I want to feed my kids the best nutrition I can. But where do you draw the line of like, okay, don't also want to be too crazy if they're out and eating and whatever, it's like you don't want to go overboard in either way. So where do you find your balance with your kids?
Oh, it is, Katie. This is like so the things I've found a nice balance. I was so scared well, I guess I'll answer your first question, which was um just the importance to me about quality is, I feel like I kind of talk about this in my second book where we like ate just local for 30 days,
Mhm.
uh, sourced only local food. And it wasn't like local companies, it was like actually local ingredients. And
Mhm.
the one thing that I really tried to think of with like what health looks like, is it good for my body? Is this food good for the environment, and is this food good for other people? Like, how are the people producing this food? Like, uh uh is this something I want to support with my
Yeah.
money? And so,
Like
and I think
ethical.
yeah, is it ethical? And I think the further away our food comes from, or the more packaged it is, or the more ingredients that are in it, the less we know about that. And so, and that's something I do want to teach my kids too. Like, we don't really know what all went into that bag of Cheetos. Like, what is this good for other people? How are, so there's a lot there, but at the same time, I don't want to go too crazy, but for me, it really is like, is it good for my body? Is it good for, the environment, and is it good for other people? So I think about that for me is like something I try and think about when I'm eating. And for my kids, when I first became a mom, and it was in 2020. My daughter was born March 14th of 2020, like the day the world shut down. Pepper
Wow. Yeah,
entered the
wasn't it like the 17th?
Oh my gosh, it was the worst timing.
Oh.
There was so much. So my anxiety was like, boom, first time
Yeah.
mom, totally alone in it because we didn't have any help because no one could come out and
Mm.
we didn't know what we were doing. But so I was so scared of like, anything I put on her little body. I was starting to like, really go down like, oh my gosh, are the sheets I ordered for her gonna like
Yeah.
cancer? Oh my
Exactly.
God. Like, I mean, those early hormones are like a blessing and a curse, because the middle of the night panics of like, oh shoot, like, is this little like sleep sack she's in gonna like cause, anyways,
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
a whole that's a whole other podcast episode. But um with my first daughter, I was really nervous about when it came time to feed her. Like, I wanted the most pure stuff going into her little body. I remember the day that I like saw, you know, my like dad give her like a little French fry, and it was just like, Joe, like, I just thought like, she's ruined this little body, like all
Mhm.
this crap is just going through her little perfect system. Um and I thought, oh my gosh, that's just gonna like totally screw her taste buds. And she's like, I don't know, like 9 months old at that point. And so it was very real. I was very rigid with her, and she's a great eater. Like, I will say, that girl, I was giving her beef liver. I was like doing all the gnarly stuff.
Yeah.
But there was so much anxiety and there was so much fear that if I look back on it now, I don't know that I enjoyed the early stages of feeding her. I was so I just wanted her to be healthy. So I
Mhm.
like avoided going to people's house, or we always had our own food with us, which I actually still do, but in such a more relaxed way. But with
Mhm.
her, so I was so rigid, and I would turn down social gatherings because I was be around other moms that I felt like didn't share the same philosophies as me. And of course, this was like 2020. So like none of this was real. Like, with her, it was like a little easier to not do social gatherings. And when we were, everyone was kind of bringing their own stuff anyways. But as she got even bigger, like even when we got into like when she was 2, and like we were seeing people more and had our little pods, I would get like, I wasn't as excited because I just was like, so and so is going to bring their chips or the
Mhm.
goldfish. And I was like, fucking goldfish. Like, those were like my nemesis, the damn goldfish. I still hate goldfish. They're everywhere. But I would just be so rigid. And then I would just like kill myself the night before, being like, I'm gonna make my own goldfish. And so like
There is
now,
a goldfish recipe in there.
you want to know something, Katie? It's really good. It's really good. And now I can make it with my kiddos, and it's fun. But like, I would do these things like last minute, like be like 11 o'clock at night, and be like, oh my gosh, if we're gonna go to this, I'm gonna make my own crackers then. And
Mhm.
like that did come out of like just this fear of like the health of my kiddo and like that her health was going to be ruined by goldfish served at like a play date. Um,
Mhm.
so now I still am like so passionate about like ingredients. What comes into our house, that I think will never, for the most part, never change. I still don't buy those things. I have definitely adopted a more like what comes into our house is I have high standards for that.
Mhm.
I will cut costs in any other way. Like food to me is very important,
Yeah.
but I have definitely loosened up with like, stuff that's being served other places. My youngest now, she's 1.5, and she's definitely had stuff that Pepper didn't have until, more recently. Um, and she's not quite as adventurous of an eater as Pepper. And part of me is like, is that because she had like French fries when she was way younger more often? Like, I don't know. But I don't care because we see people more often and there's so much
Yeah.
freedom in that. And I think
Right.
that I don't want, especially moms, because there's so much on our plates anyways to ever be like, I think more than anything, we have to be surrounded by other moms. And so like to like not want to do hangouts because of food stuff, if every other aspect of the play date sounds awesome or the interaction or like what you're gonna do, like just do it because I think otherwise
Mhm.
it's like I would say no because I would get so nervous about the crap that was going to be served and like even now like my kiddos, my oldest, like if we go to something and there's a lot of sugar, she'll come home and she's a total nightmare. And I know why. But I think it's really important to still do those things. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's,
It is. It's like I think for starters, like everybody, when they first get like really into their health and wellness, can go to that kind of like rigid place and then
uh-huh.
evolve to this like place of balance where it's like, all right, I'm gonna like keep do what I can, like especially in your home, like you mentioned. And that's such a good stance to have. Like there's all these other elements of health, like community and connection and
Mhm.
and like enjoying those moments and not having that fear come up. But it is so hard. I feel like I've just overall, like personally, not even because Artie's only 9 months old, so I haven't had too long of navigating choices with him and whatnot. But it's definitely on a personal level been something where I feel like I was much more rigid, and then realizing like, okay, you have to also find like your balance with it. And I think it's just a course of the roller coaster we all ride when we're trying to improve our health, and like feeling like, okay, the psychology behind my choices matters too if I'm making myself miserable doing it.
Totally. And the stress can be just as can be more damaging than like the actual ingredients. And
Yeah.
I think for me, the one thing, and then I'm like, well, now I just have to get on a policy level. I think the most frustrating thing is that the f- the food that's offered, I just get so pissed that it's even available. It's not
Yeah.
that it just like because it's designed to be addictive. Designed to be harmful. Like it is. It's designed to
Yeah.
get you to go to the doctor eventually. Like it, and when I mean, I spent so much my children's book was so awesome, but I did so much research for it and it was so scary. The research actually like made my anxiety go up just knowing like what's in the food and like just seeing kids' behavioral issues and depression and anxiety along with all these other like, true diseases are on the rise and like that
Mhm.
there's this direct correlation and that it's really hard to backtrack if they're raised, especially in the first 2 years on a lot of processed food. Like it's really
Mhm.
hard to get them to go back to real food or whole foods. And like kind of seeing that like their brain chemistry changes like when they have ultra processed food and a lot of sugar. And so I reading all that was like, oh my God. But then again,
Mhm.
like I think the knowledge is really powerful. And I think for folks that can support a different system, I think it is sort of our duty if we're able to do that, to kind of keep demanding these changes and then to also let it go when
Yep.
the time is right, when it's
Yeah.
a bad look to be that person.
Yeah, I'm 100% like on the same page because I think that's why it's so hard sometimes because there's so much like food freedom and like you need how you're eating is just as important. And like I completely believe in all of the mind body connection and psychoneuroimmunology and how, you know, our thoughts impact our health. And if we're like being super rigid, then that's not great. And if we're, yeah, like embracing fluctuations in our choices, but on the other hand, it's very disconcerting when you get in, like you said, the policy level where it's like, but the overlap between the food system and the healthcare system and big pharma and the conflict of interest and the toxins in our food that aren't in the other countries in Europe and just how corrupt the food system to healthcare pipeline is, you're like, wow, okay, but people need to care. It can't really be one extreme or the other. Like we can't be rigid and obviously like never allow anything, but it's like you do have to be like a defensive consumer in a lot of ways because like unfortunately I don't even think the healthcare system has our best interests at heart. So it's like you have to be educating yourself on this and knowing that, yeah, I'm not going to be perfect. And of course, like being neurotic about it is not helpful, which like I've definitely been in that situation where I feel like I have been. But on the other hand, like I feel like people need to be empowered with the information that like food is chemically addictive and there's tons of additives and it is linked to like childhood, like attention deficit or just different things that we're seeing such an increase of in kids. And so like like finding that balance, it really can't be like one or the other. We really have to find the nuance, which is like the case in so many things these days where people just want to like look at one side of it. It's like, you can't do that anymore.
It's so inconvenient. And when you're a mom or a parent, like it's really inconvenient to know some of this stuff because it can make life a little more difficult when you're like just trying to get breakfast on the table and you want like a convenient option, but it's like it it's like these inconvenient truths to like
Yeah.
know these things. But and I do think it does sometimes, even with friends, and I've found like a nice little village of other moms that we share a lot of interests. And now I have one child that's in preschool part-time, and my God, the food that's served there, like that is a whole other mission that I'm on right now. But I mean, it's criminal. It is so criminal that this is like what is being served to our like most vulnerable population. Our future is being served prison food. And we're like, well, their brains are broken. Like their brains are broken. So but I think like, you know, going back to, and this is where sometimes like if like it was just like, you know, Valentine's Day, yesterday, and like growing up, my favorite were the Reese's peanut butter cup, like the hearts, because like
Mhm.
chocolate to peanut butter ratio is just like spot on with the like
Better than the eggs for
I
Easter?
love the eggs too. I love all the holiday ones.
Okay,
The
I just had an egg the other
they
day.
like nail. They really
Wow.
nail. But you know, I start like, I think that, you know, I'm like, okay, like once a year, like I'm going to buy one of those things. They're always at the checkout at the grocery store, like in the like individual, but like, I think that it becomes a lot easier. Those like impulse purchases or those like, I'm just going to buy this box of crackers. I think for me, at least, it's been easier to make those decisions to say no a lot, not so much to the craving, but going back to the like, who's this supporting right now? And
Mhm.
I think that like the more like there are other companies or there are other things that you can put your money towards. Like I think when you start to look at it less like you're depriving yourself or depriving your kid or like just to like it doesn't mean you can't buy it or don't buy it, but just like what am I supporting right now? Like am I
Mhm.
supporting a system that like actually is
Cares.
cares? Yeah, and has my best interest at heart? No. Do I want to give this my money? Like probably not. And
Yeah,
so
and
it
it's
makes it easier to like like to not buy some of those like really common household brands, I think can be a little bit easier to like say no. And then
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, I don't know.
No, I totally think that's so accurate too, is just voting with your dollar and realizing, because too, I would say like most people probably have this belief like, oh, if it's on the shelves, that aren't like in the thick of the research like you and I have been at points, because I've definitely gone down wormholes too with this all and had like my whole spiritual awakening, dark night of the soul, like everything is trying to kill us. What's happening? All that stuff. But I do, and I think like it's that assumption of good intentions, and it's really sad that the more you learn, the less you have faith in the assumption of good intentions behind the food systems. And it does make you feel like, why do I want to support this company that clearly does not give like a shit about our health? I could make this, I could find like an alternative brand that's smaller, that makes something similar or doesn't have like a bunch of chemicals in it. So it certainly is an important like thing to be discerning about. And one thing too that really stood out to me that you said that I've been thinking a lot about too is the idea of convenience, and how it's like our society has really built this like normalization of lives that are completely overwhelming and like require us to be basing our decisions off like what's convenient instead of what is like nourishing, what's healthy. And we look at our health and nutrition and eating as this like inconvenience that we just have to like get done. And meanwhile, it's this like major life-giving function and ceremony and opportunity for connection to others and ourselves, and like our survival is based on it. But yet we kind of have like viewed it as like this nuisance where we just gotta like make things easy. And like everyone, I talk to so many people that are like, I hate cooking, I do not cook. And I feel like a big part of that is because people feel like it's an inconvenience. And it's like, I don't know. For me, I've just really created this relationship with cooking where it feels really therapeutic to me. I've also made a concerted effort to like build a life that is peaceful, and like I don't have to feel like I have to rush my way through like cooking dinner. And obviously I only have one baby and I don't have a bunch of kids, and it's different and I'm learning as I go. But I just think it's sad that we've normalized lifestyles that require us to prioritize convenience as the primary like decision making criteria. And I think
Absolutely.
it's leading to so many health problems for people because our priorities are so out of whack. Like you're prioritizing convenience now for like way bigger problems later.
Mhm. Totally. And people are just like in, yeah, just desperation mode. And that has like a a timeline before it just like erupts. And yeah, I think that the rush through dinner, like I feel lucky too that I love to cook, and I've gotten like, it's funny because my husband doesn't cook that often, and like watching him slice an onion, I'm just like I have to leave the room because it's just like so slow. It is like, I've got a rhythm, like, I can kind of whip things up, and I enjoy it. And but I get like that, like when you're just first starting, it's so overwhelming. But I do think like, especially now, it's like being able to listen to music or put on a podcast, and like even for me, like having kiddos, like it is kind of nice if like my husband, and I'm lucky if he's home a lot in the evenings, we get to eat most of our meals together. But like if he's with the kiddos, and I can have a little like alone time. Or now like my oldest does kind of like to like be up in and see what I'm cooking and like participate. And that turns into like, okay, win-win. This is an activity. And like, yeah, some of the potatoes are going to be cut like giant and like, or small, like, the cooking times for this is going to be a little wonky. Some things are going to be burnt and some things aren't going to be cooked all
Hmm.
the way. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
But it's, yeah, I think that it's, yeah, the conveniences and the rushing through it all is just like, it's not, we're not
Yeah.
supposed to do that. And I think,
Yeah. yeah, like this is life. These are the moments we're supposed to be like living for, is these like moments with our families, spending quality time, and yet we're rushing through it half the time. Like, I don't have time to like eat and sit down with my family because I have like what to do, this job or work. And I understand, we have to make livings, all the things. But yeah, I think I've been reading the myth of normal right now.
Yes, I've read
Yeah.
that.
And it's
It's
like
very
healing from trauma and sickness in a toxic
Mhm.
society, and talking a lot about, stress and how our society is just hugely stressful. And we really don't acknowledge like the greater impact that has on the prevalence of like autoimmune conditions specifically. But I think it just also speaks to like what we value and prioritize, which is like a disconnection from our bodies, of like complete like, you know, fight or flight mode more often than really knowing what like a calm nervous system feels like. And all of those things combined like really put nutrition on the back burner for a lot of people. And that's really sad.
It's really sad, and I get so nervous for the kiddos, especially just growing up with, like, everyone. I mean, that's part of my distaste with, like, it's, like, such a bad thing. I just, like, published a book, and now I'm, like, trying to leave social media, but, like, I don't want them growing up with me on my phone or being distracted.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I know that there's, like, a way to do it without, but, like, it is addicting. Like, it is addicting to,
Hmm.
like, post something and to check or to, like, get engaged or to all of a sudden be scrolling when you go on for 1 second. Like, it's
Yeah.
it's
It's a time you have to be very vigilant. And actually you inspired me because when I was preparing for our podcast like earlier this month, I I think like for me, what I've noticed too is like if you don't, and this is like a me thing, I don't know if you can relate, but if I don't create boundaries around it, I kind of like post more often. Like I get in that like mode of like, it feels like frantic energy. Like I'm trying to keep up, or a sense of urgency, and like not going to be relevant or something if I'm not posting all the time.
Mhm.
And I just was like, I'm not subscribing to that feeling anymore. I don't feel like it's contributing to me manifesting what I really want. I feel like it feels like a scarcity mindset, and social media like sucks you in that way. And also, as somebody who like wants to create from a place of inspiration, I don't think we can do that unless we like actively take time away from social media to like tune inward, because we see so much on it. It's like, what is actually like coming authentically from my own inner well of inspiration, and what is like some regurgitation of something I saw like scrolling, you know.
Totally.
And
Totally.
so
And it takes a lot of energy to get the content out, and I look at some of these accounts that I've followed and loved for so long, but now I'm kind of, like, have a different lens where I'm like, we like, I don't know, it's like the amount of work and time away from your family to, like, document it all, or even documenting it in real time with your family, like, and I'm saying this from I've done this.
yeah.
Like, I don't that doesn't feel good anymore. It used to feel so innocent and, like, it felt, like, purposeful, and now it doesn't feel very good,
Mhm.
like, documenting these moments or to, like, document our life, and, like, God, I've, like, written books about, my kids and, like, but there's the social media aspect of that. Now I'm like, I wanna keep a lot of this sacred. I don't wanna be documenting this, like,
Mhm.
I just don't. I want my phone and technology to be far away from this really precious time
Yeah.
because it doesn't feel really right anymore. And
Yeah.
I see my kiddos and we like go place and people are just staring at these phones all the time. And it's not normal. Like going back to that myth of normal, like it is not normal. And I think we're so distracted from
Yeah.
ourselves and our kiddos and our families. It's
Yeah. And it
bad.
It has been so liberating too, because I was kind of like, I was already just like, oh, I just need to take like a break. I'm leaving my full-time job for my coaching business and my son to like be a mom. And I'm like, when I do, and it was funny because I went to your page to like do the questions when I sent them, last month or whatever. And I saw the post that was like, I'm just taking a step back and I'm not going to be on here as much. And another like friend, or I saw a couple things and I was like, I feel like this is just validating the intuitive feeling I have to just, and it's February. It feels like a time to just like be dormant before the spring. And so it's been like so liberating. And it's funny because the less time I spend on social media, the actual like more inspiration I have for things I want to share. So I have like a whole list of like thoughts that have come to mind, but it's really put things into a new perspective too, and just having kids and deciding like how much you do want to share on behalf of them. And like he's part of my life, but like I am protective of his privacy, and I never want to feel like he's being exploited on social media or whatnot. Like it does feel innocent, but then it's also like, I don't know, you pour all this energy and effort into content and sharing your family with people, which on one hand I think is really beneficial to do and be able to kind of provide this like light in a space, for other people to see like healthy living and healthy families. But on the other hand, I'm like, but also like, why do they deserve this? And I feel like I'm kind of just getting more protective over putting out content in general and being like, I want this to go to people who want to receive it. And I know a lot of my audience is there for that, but some people just, it's like we are so saturated with it that people don't like seem to really like people are just so used to like free content, like unfazed, like scrolling by. I'm like, what am I really doing this for? So
totally, it's shifted over the years, and it's started to feel a little ickier, and so I don't know what the future is for it, but it's when you have a business and you've got a product, or it's like it's a double-edged sword, because you need a presence to get people to you, because you're offering something really beneficial, but it's hard to then
just slowly dying inside while you do it.
There's got to be another way.
Yeah,
let me know if you find the other way.
I know I will, because I've been, I've always really loved social media too, in a lot of ways, because I do feel like it's this creative outlet. But then I'm like, yeah, but you can use that energy in a blog post. You can use it on your website. You could use it like creating. You don't have to use it for this. And you could post a third as much and direct people all to the content that you're creating, so it's like there are ways to like shift the ways in which you use it. And I definitely, like, you inspired me to be thinking a lot more intentionally about that. And speaking of what you had said about running a business and everything, and so it is this double-edged sword. You have 3 cookbooks: Let Them Eat Dirt, Digging Up the Dirt, and Local Dirt, right?
Yeah. Or dishing up the dirt.
Dishing up the dirt. Dishing up the dirt. Yes. Digging up the dirt. Yeah. No. Yeah. I feel like for me, I'm just so curious, because I've always been really, really feeling compelled to, like, I think at one point in my life, I want to write a book. And so when I see people do that, I'm always so curious, like, how did you get the courage to do it? How did you figure out the process? What did that look like? Where was the inspiration? Like, what was the process from like a little seedling of an idea to the book getting published?
Well, I mean, maybe I got to cheat a little bit. I did not have any intention of writing a cookbook, but I had a blog. And so my blog was simple. It was like what we had done on the farm all day, and then what we cooked up with like whatever was growing that time of the year. And like it would kind of like, the blog had a lot of like trials and tribulations of like what we used to sleep in the field when we didn't have a deer fence to like scare off the deer in the middle of the night with our dog. Like, so this blog had all these stories intertwined with then these like recipes. And a literary agent reached out to me, and she worked for a literary agency in New York City, and she was curious if I had ever thought about writing a cookbook. And I was like, no, I don't even know like how to begin. And I also was like, and I'm not a chef. Like I like, I don't even really measure anything. I just like whip things up, like, out of like delirium and like the field. And she was like, no, that's great. Like that's like what we're looking for, like to pitch. And so I got to work with a literary agent um, that like had all this guidance for me. And so I got to like, she helped me like write up a proposal for what I wanted to. And I thought like, if I want write a cookbook, I really want to tell this like farming story. And so, I did wrote a proposal, and she shopped that around. And then I got picked up by HarperCollins. They offered a book deal. And I was so excited. And so they published my first two books. And once I got in with them, it was easier to pitch a second book.
Yeah.
But the process of writing the books it's a lot. It's really daunting. After each book I've done, I've always said like, I'll never do that again.
Like that's done. It's like having a baby.
Yeah.
But then like you're like a day goes by and you're like,
yeah, so bad. So
she got like 5 more.
Yeah, exactly. The process of writing a book, it's tedious, it's long. There's so much back and forth with your editor. It is like, it's very humbling too, because like you can get your work ripped to shreds. But it's also like, it's also some of the most proud I've ever been of myself is like, having these ideas, and especially like the kids book. That one was more just like such a passion project, because I feel so strongly about nourishing like the little kids, and like making food taste really good for their little palates and their little bodies. So the process is hard and it's tedious, but yeah, for me it's been really worth it. And it's brought a lot of people to like our farm and our CSA, and like, so it's kind of that the writing and like the books and the blog have also helped our like farm business. So it's sort of this full circle.
Yeah, that sounds really synchronistic. That they're like, "Hey, want to write a cookbook?"
Yeah,
like,
so
okay.
that was pretty lucky for me, because I know it's hard to write a proposal and to get it. Like with a literary agent, they already have connections with these publishers, but I think it's really hard. I think if I have any tip for anyone that's wanting to write a book, it's to find a literary agent, because they will
have the connections to the publishers, and so they kind of like pitch for you.
Yeah, because from what I understand, and I could be wrong, but from what I understand, it's really hard to get your proposal even like on the desk of somebody to read if you don't have somebody with connections.
Yeah,
and
the middleman.
Yeah.
So. Right. Yeah, I know. It's such an interesting process. I'm always curious about that. And so, and I know you were talking about like the kids cookbook, and I wanted to ask, just we've been talking a little bit like before the call and now about how your passion is really like the health of the next generation. And I guess that makes me think of like, what are, your values as a mom, and just with everything you're doing, like what are some of the most important things that you think we can instill our children with?
Yeah, this question is, I think, for me and my family, I really want to instill in my kiddos just the importance of like contributing to their community. Like they're our little neck of the woods. I think that the big world is such a scary, daunting place when there's so many people in need and like so many horrible things happening. Like I want my kids to know that they matter and that they can contribute and make a difference in like the lives of like our neck of the woods, and that's really the most important. I think now like it's so sad to hear like kiddos being lonelier than ever and feeling really disconnected, and I think that
social media,
going back to social media, that damn social media. So yeah, having these like real these real childhoods. Like, I mean, I feel like blessed to, even though I was in the suburbs, but like to like have neighbors and friends and like to know about like a neighbor that was sick and to like bake cookies. Like, you know, my mom, we would know about these like real local things that we could like actually do. Were we going to save these people? No. But like, you know, I feel like now it's harder to like know if like a neighbor's struggling or if like somebody's dog died. Like, you know, with my kids, it's so nice to like be like, well, what can we do? Well, a lot of times like, let's bring them some food. Like, let's cook them
Mhm.
something or like bring them some food or like, I just, yeah, I want my kids to really like know that they matter and that in mattering that means that people like will rely on them to like to show up.
Mhm.
And I think even for being a mom, like I want to do the same for like other moms. Like it's, you know, the beginning of motherhood was like lonely because it was so new and I didn't have a lot of mom friends.
Mhm.
And now it's like without my like soul sisters that are like fellow moms that are my fit, like half of them aren't even on social media. Like it's so wonderful to have these like really deep, like in-person connections. And like it is a lifeline. I think it's just as important as a healthy marriage is like mom friends. And I want my kids to also see that. So I think for
Yeah.
them, yeah, like having a rich community is more important than like a good job or like I don't know, good grades. Like they just need yeah, to have
Yeah.
community and contribute.
Yeah, I love that. I think sometimes when we look at the bigger world, it can be paralyzing to a lot of people and they think, oh, like what difference can I make anyways? Whereas like my focus and when I have gone down, I feel like that's the antidote for me when I have gone down the rabbit holes of like, oh my God, the world is so fucked up. Like, what the hell?
Uh-huh.
Like this is just unfixable, is to realize like, yeah, but you're never probably gonna fix all those things. And so what positive impact can you have in your little corner of the world? And don't let like the larger world that maybe you can't impact directly prevent you from impacting what you can
Mhm.
impact directly. And who knows what ripple effect that will have. It could ripple into the greater like, you know, landscape of the world, and it will in some small way, but like that's really the most impact we can have, I think, as when we focus in like a smaller way in our immediate reality, you know. And even I remember with during the pandemic and how contentious and like emotionally like heightened it was on the news. But then I would like go out in my community and be like, well, wait a second, like
Uh-huh.
people are nice and happy and like everyone's not fighting with each other. So why am I even like participating in that narrative when that's like not what I'm seeing in a day to day in my reality? And like maybe it was other places. And there's more to be said about the benefit of creating divisiveness like on a large scale. But it's just like really zooming into where you can create impact, I think is so powerful. And that idea of like the importance of connection and community in real life. Like I've loved social media in so many ways, you know, when I was first like not drinking and I didn't have a big community of people who didn't drink alcohol around me, and it wasn't like I was embarking on that journey in more of a traditional recovery focused way. It was more of like, I just don't really feel like drinking as much anymore. And I want to see what it can be like without it. And I didn't really have community. And so social media was wonderful in that way. But like, there's just no replacement to like sisterhood in real life.
Totally. And so many of those, what's hard is like you kind of nailed it with that, like with like for you, it's like, well, maybe you didn't need like maybe the well, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like the AA community
Yeah.
or whatever the other and like I think of like we don't really go to church, but like those institutions are so wonderful because y'all show up and you kind of have each other's backs. And like I think when you're like new to an area or you're like a new mom or you like there's these places you can go and you have sort of you have a built-in community, and so many people aren't going to church anymore, and so many people aren't like, yeah, like these places that like,
Old
it,
institutions are kind of like not a good fit. Like you said, like church, AA, like some of these things, like it isn't like a good fit for everyone. And maybe you don't feel like you fit in there, but there's like a reason why that community element is like so popular.
right. And it's so, I mean, and we need it. Like, I mean, it's a human need, especially like in, I think for so many people, like, like in an early stages of not drinking or in the early stages of like motherhood, you're like, I need people that are in this same season as I am right now, because it's really, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, or like what, and I think like there's these identity shifts. And so it is really nice to be with people that are like either in the same season or have been in that season, and they're like you're elder, that are like, come
Yeah.
under,
Like,
like,
come,
yeah,
dear.
like it's, yeah, where you're like, okay, you've got it a little more, like I'm a little shaky on my feet right now, and like, yeah, I'm like really lucky because one of my like dear friends is a mom of four, and like she's got her kiddos range from like 18 down to 4. Actually, she's got
Wow.
5. One of them's a step kid, but like she was like, just took me under like, I mean, I'm just like entered motherhood, so like I don't know, how am I don't know what I'm doing. Like this is so, and this is, and none of my friends had kiddos. Yeah, all
Yeah.
my friends were like, you know, still, yeah, still partying, and I was like at home, like,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
am I
You're like,
doing? Like,
oh, and my
yeah,
hormones are raging and I'm weepy and ragey. I don't
yeah,
know. It's funny because I look back on like postpartum, and at the time I'm like, oh, I was like fine. But now I like look back, I'm like, oh wow, like how raw and vulnerable I was. Like I handled it, weathered it like well, but I do feel like I'm like, yeah, you should just stay away from the internet, just like rest and relax, because you do feel like, oh, I'm good. Like let me just get back after it. And I put a lot of pressure on myself to do that and just like get back. And that's another thing, our society kind of makes you feel like you should be not resting and just getting back to work. And there's no real respect for the pause or slowing down at different seasons of life. And yeah, it really does make such a difference to expose yourself when you're in the beginning stage of anything to people who have been there, people who have done it, people who are going where you want to go. And I mean, that's a huge thing I emphasize to people all the time is like, you cannot underestimate the power of like-minded community. And, you're not always going to need to be surrounded by only like-minded community. But when you're in a vulnerable stage of like new motherhood, new sobriety, trying to improve your health and make different lifestyle choices, like whatever the beginning stage is, like it's a crucial time to protect your like energy and your progress and your growth and like that like new budding seed of identity and chapter of your life. And I think then you do like get your bearings and your tolerance is good and you can like introduce a lot more variety into like people you give your energy to and who you spend time with. But I think it's like so crucial in the beginning of anything to have that support of people who like really have your back and want to see you win in whatever it is.
totally.
So yeah. Well, yeah, this episode has been brought to you by Artie screaming in the background. Sorry if you could
Oh,
hear that.
I'm like, is that your kid or my kid?
He's screaming. Yeah, no, he's quiet now, but um I can already like envision John in my mind's eye, like, here you go when I get out there. Because he's like, woo. But I did want to ask like a couple last questions. And to wrap things up, I wanted to say, like, in your ideal world, how would you see like the food system optimized? We kind of talked about like the shortcomings of the food system. So like on a policy level, on an individual level, on a collective level, like what do you think that is within our control to actually shift the dynamics of the food system?
I mean, in my ideal world, it will never happen.
Yeah.
But my ideal world is that like we like know and like love the people producing our food.
Mhm.
And that is not feasible. But I think to a certain extent it is, to a certain extent it is. I think in my ideal world, these big corporations would be like out of the way and just like extinct. But I think in my ideal world, it would be that people like have the knowledge to really advocate for like a healthier food system, for like the land, and I don't even think that this has, because like I know people are like, can go into like vegan or carnivore, like
Mhm.
whatever. I just think like going back to like your community and like what grows well, what can be raised well, like starting small. If like everyone could start like maybe frequenting like their farmers markets and supporting local, because like local economy is, I think, so important. And I think that can slowly, have a ripple effect. But I think that there is a long way to go before we're
Mhm.
able to do that.
Yeah.
But I do like, I think that, yeah, for this, like, yeah, for this next generation of kiddos, like, I do think like advocating for like they didn't like consent to having their like bodies poisoned by like all of this ultra processed crap. So I want them to
Mhm.
like rebel and
Yeah.
like and just demand better.
Yeah, and I think like that level of awareness, and I think of it on an individual level as like the process of change, starts with like pre-contemplation, contemplation, and I feel like collectively our awareness around what's going on with our food system. And I am also a product of the 90s and early 2000s, and my mom was like pretty crunchy, but I still, school lunches, I was just like eating whatever. You think that you can trust what you're eating. And I think slowly we're realizing that, that's not the case. Doesn't mean you should shame yourself or worry about things that like you did when you weren't like knowledgeable about it. It also doesn't mean like you're going to be 100% perfect, but I think we have to like get out of the ignorance is bliss mentality, and also not think that like we have to go down a million rabbit holes and like doomsday ourselves either. And just being like, I always say, like, if we all gave the teensy a shit and just like slightly educated ourselves and advocated, rather than, I think a lot of people just like kind of put the blinders on because they're like, yeah, I don't really want to know because that sounds like it's going to make my life harder.
Uh-huh.
And I think like we need to get past like that idea of it being inconvenient to like advocate for our health and be knowledgeable about where our food's coming from, and realize like we've been brainwashed to think otherwise, but like that is the most important thing, I think, is that connection to our bodies, what we're putting in it, and how we're, fueling ourselves in mind, body, and spirit. So
Absolutely.
you know what? Slowly but surely, hopefully.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
tell everyone where they can find your books, your blog, everything that like is what you're working on right now.
Yeah. My books are available anywhere books are sold. So you can get them at your local bookstore. And if your local bookstore isn't carrying it, they can carry it. You can just ask. Or on Amazon. And then my websites are letthemeatdirtkids.com and dishingupthedirt.com.
Mm-hmm.
Dishingupthedirt.com is really good for if you're frequenting your farmer's market or a part of a CSA, because it's easy to search by vegetable category and there's hundreds of recipes. I've had that website for like 15 years.
That's awesome.
And then my letthemeatdirtkids.com website is actually like, and it's not just for kids, it's really family oriented. I think that the food on there is like just as delicious as the other website, but it is more geared towards like busy parents and picky eaters, picky
Mhm.
kids. So it's real food, but it is recipes that are nourishing and simple and, are hopefully. I
Yeah.
have some pretty tough critics, and they
Yeah.
give them a thumbs up for the most part. So
Yeah. That's so awesome because it does kind of combat, helping ease people in away from like rush, 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 convenience, convenience. Like you don't have to jump to another end of the spectrum. There's just little micro shifts and ways that you can be slightly healthier every day. And also remembering, like, stressing about it isn't helpful. Just try to be like 1% better, as Atomic Habits says, 1% better every day.
Love it.
Yeah, I love that. I can't wait to check out the kids' website because I can't believe I didn't even know about that one. So,
I love it.
anyways,
Well,
thank you
Katie,
so much.
yeah, no, thank you, Katie. This was such a fun conversation. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it is. I know. I feel like we could have gone in a million different directions and talked for hours, but I so appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Go check out Andrea, get her cookbooks, and just work on that 1% better every day. And we'll see you next time.